All right, welcome everybody. As you're starting to come in, we'll have a few more minutes, let more attendees come in. So welcome though. Everyone, as more of you are coming in, it's 12 o'clock. We're gonna wait about 2 more minutes and we will get started to allow the stragglers to come in. All right, let's get started. Welcome to this special Veterans Week event. My name is Jake Dooley. I am the pre-deployment program manager here at Local Vest. Normally, our events are matching veterans who are out raising capital with investors who like to invest in them. Today is a little bit different. We're going to discuss burn pits and toxicity and Camp Lejeune Water, all these topics that have been out in the news in 2022. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. We have a panel to go through. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to introduce Bill Militello. He's the CEO and co-founder of Local Vest, and they're the host for the event today. And we'll give him a chance to talk about what Local Vest does, since some of you may not be familiar about what happens on the platform and what Local Vest is about. So Bill, I'll turn that over to you, and then we'll start with the panel.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to take a few minutes this morning to tell you about Local Vest, the Veteran Investor Network. Our mission is really simple, is to build the largest community of veterans investing and supporting veteran entrepreneurs. So Local Vest is a marketplace to invest in veteran-led opportunities. Veterans raising capital can create a deal tile to put all the documents like videos, presentations, investor spreadsheets in one place with an easy to share link. And so investors can find those deals and show more interest or show interest to learn more. And issuers can then, or entrepreneurs can generate insights from those interactions and follow up with interested investors. Local Vest hosts events like this one and markets these opportunities to our network. So if you're a veteran raising capital, schedule some time with us and we can discuss with you all the different ways we can help you raise capital. And if you want to invest in other veterans, sign up for the site. It's free to look and you can find deals that you may like. And we're constantly adding more opportunities. And of course, we'll provide you with links when we send out the recording of the show. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you very much, Bill. So as I mentioned at the start of the show, burn pits, toxicity, Camp Lejeune Water, all major topics that we've had when it comes to Veterans Affairs in 2022. In fact, the legislation that we talked about this summer and we saw passed, it was all over the news. People said that's the biggest legislation change that we've had in years when it comes to veterans benefits. And I got to tell you, I was very confused about what happened, what was going on in the background, what are the rights, what can we do? And that's why I want to have this panel today to talk about what happened and then provide an opportunity. What do we need to do going forward if you're a veteran that may have been affected? So I'm glad that you're all here. I wanted to take the time to introduce our panel. We have 3 people here who are experts in what happened this year and what we need to do going forward. So first I'll introduce Bob Carey. He's the director of the National Defense Committee. So he was lobbying Congress this summer to get the PACT Act passed. A lot of the things in the background, so you didn't see him up on TV. At least I don't think you were on TV when it came into doing it. So, but then of course you're a veteran as well. Maybe you could give a quick background of before you started lobbying, what you did when you were in service.
Started off, thank you very much for having me as well. And started off as a surface warfare officer, a ship driver. Did that for 1 year, 11 months, 14 days, 53 minutes, 28 seconds. That was an awesome tour. And then I became A6 Bombardier Navigator, and that was pretty cool. Got off active duty after about 10 years of total service, stayed in the reserves. Post 9/11, recalled 4 times, sent down range. I was pretty much a Rempo at that point, but you know, was still in the area. And then I finally retired from reserves in 2015. And then I've also been working a lot on the veteran advocacy side, mostly on healthcare, suicide prevention, and with the healthcare came the burn pit exposure and the PACT Act.
Excellent. It's great to have you here. Now, all the things that you work in the background, more on the forefront of what was happening is we have Will Wisner. He was out there. You did see him standing next to like John Stewart and trying to do the organized events, protesting the Capitol steps. He's the executive director of the Grunt Style Foundation. So, and you are Army, right? Background, if I have it right, Will. Hopefully I didn't screw that. Sir. Okay. But also, this is probably a good opportunity. People make this mistake. The difference between the Grunt Style Foundation and the T-shirt company we're familiar with, how that works and what that means.
Yeah, sure. So Grunt Style decided to stand up our own foundation in April of 2021. Historically, Grunt Style gives around $500,000 annually to different charities. They decided to take that next step into creating a private foundation. They went pretty much the first half of last year, kind of following that same model, just channeling that through that foundation. And then I came on board in December officially. And at that point, we shifted gears away from more of the grant-making agency over to a public charity with our own program to support. The majority of our funding comes from endowment from Grunt Style. So we are same brand, same logos, all that good stuff, but we are 2 separate organizations.
Very good, great. Well, I always want to make sure everyone has that distinction in there, right, to go through, but very related. And I'm glad that you're here, and I think you'll all find more of Will's personal side, and then what was happening this summer and what we have going forward very much tie into this topic. And then our last panelist is Ron LaSorsa. He's the managing director of the Victory Litigation Fund. And you'll see they're doing a lot when it comes to the litigation side of the Camp Lejeune Water issue, which is all over our television. You'll see why he's an expert when it comes to that. But if you could, Ron, there's a personal element for you too about what makes you distinctly, you know, a professional and have the expertise when it comes to this topic of Camp Lejeune Water. If you can go into your veteran side of things.
Certainly. Thank you, Jake. So yeah, this is personal for me. I'm a class of '89 Naval Academy graduate. I'm a Marine Corps combat veteran. Earned my MBA while I was on active duty. I was stationed at Camp Lejeune from 1990 to 1994. And I was the base commanding general's aide to camp from 92 to 94. I had 2 children that were born during that time, and I believe both of them were directly affected by the contamination. I spent 10 years on Wall Street, understanding and working in derivative trading, and then another 10 years plus in litigation finance. I've had a $40 million exit, selling a law firm as a non-attorney, and I've made well over $500 million in legal fees. So I have what's referred to as unmatched experience and expertise in this area. I created the Victory Litigation Fund, and really the goal is to build evergreen wealth as a means to advance social justice on behalf of veterans. So I've aligned the litigation finance business model, which is really the most profitable business model in the world, pound for pound, with the veterans' rights movement. So I refer to it as strategic philanthropy. So veterans taking care of veterans.
Good.
That's the idea.
So you're going to see a lot more when we go through. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about this as we go through and talk these topics. So we're going to go into a panel mode here. So for all of you, I have the list of questions, things I think we'll find that it'd take up the entire hour that we have allotted for today. So I wasn't going to take questions. Like if there's something exciting, I can see in the chat if someone does that, but no slides, presentation things. We're just gonna have a conversation. So I'm looking forward to it here. So let's start with the back history. And I think I'll start with you, Bob. How this idea of toxicity, right? We can talk about what that means in here, but how long has this been a topic of conversation that was making it in front of, like, at the level of Congress and realizing we need to do something legislatively to pass something?
Well, I mean, this really all started with the Vietnam War. It is before, but it really hit its stride with the Vietnam War and the Agent Orange exposure. And not just on land, but as the Agent Orange would be swept out to sea, and whether that was getting into ships or not. And that was, you know, a big part of where we first started to address the issue of being of our military being exposed to unique chemicals. And then with Desert Storm, you had the burning of the oil wells, and that was leading a lot of troops to also having issues, both respiratory and the sort of, you know, unknown cause and effect of Gulf War illness. But it was really post 9/11 with the widespread use of burn pits that this really started to become a huge issue. And so, you know, this latest effort started and in the last Congress, in the 116th Congress, not the one we're in currently, when the Senate passed over their TEAMS Act, Toxic Exposure in American Military Act. And then the House, you know, they wanted to do their own version. And by that time, Congress expired. So they had to go to a new Congress and they had to start everything over. And so each of the Senate and the House, you know, came up with their own versions. And there's a fair amount of finger pointing, like, well, just pass our version. No, just pass our version. And it's like, how about you go to conference? I remember, you know, Schoolhouse Rock, I'm just a bill here on Capitol Hill. You know, I mean, that's the whole purpose. Have a conference committee, work it out. And they didn't want to do that. Finally, this spring, late this spring, cooler heads came to prevail. And the committees actually sat down and sort of did what's called on Capitol Hill a pre-conference. And they sort of worked out a deal. And so that's what finally was settled on with the PACT Act.
Okay, so I guess we go in here before we get to this legislation part, right? And so, Will, you've dealt with this personally when it goes, but if a veteran's coming in with some of the things that were covered under the PACT Act and this overall topic of toxicity, what was happening to a veteran going to the VA or trying to get help that needed to get fixed?
Hey, the screen was jumping a little there. I'm not sure if that was on your end or my end, but I'm assuming that what I gathered from that and what I'll speak to here, correct me if I'm wrong, is what happens to a vet when they're seeking help from the VA.
Before this happened, what was happening to a veteran going to seek help for something related to toxicity before some of this, what we had this summer?
Sure. So, really that's a big story because everybody's experience was vastly different, right? I did 10 or 12 of my 15 months in Iraq at the Al-Tawaytha nuclear complex. So I was dealing with a lot of heavy metal type toxicities. I was in and out of burn pits, going from fob to fob. A lot of other people sat in a guard tower right next to these things, meters away. They're blowing smoke. So the types of illnesses and everything, of course, were varied, but the experience was very similar. And it boils down to, and Bob could probably speak a little better to it on the nuts and bolts of what was going on within the VA. But the bottom line is roughly 80% of all of these claims were being denied. A lot of these folks had a very similar experience to what I had. And so I like to tell this story when explaining, try to put a personal spin to where people can relate to what that experience was like. But you can really summarize that as being, gaslighting by the VA is really how that felt. And so, to tell you the story, the veteran gets sick after leaving Iraq. Maybe it's a short amount of time, maybe it's a long amount of time, but inevitably they end up in the VA saying something's not right. And the first thing that's going to come back on that is, usually for the signature illness was like for constrictive bronchiolitis, which is really what we focused on for many years in the advocacy portion, trying to get attention on this. The first thing you're going to get is a pulmonary function test. Well, in that pulmonary function test, the issues with constrictive bronchiolitis are more about the ability to absorb that oxygen into the bloodstream, not so much an issue of the capacity of the lungs. So that pulmonary function test would come back in normal range. And once that would happen, you're inevitably given a psych tag, within the VA. You have a psychological issue. Now that opens up a whole other can of worms. You're now getting placed on all sorts of what, we in that community refer to as zombie dope, which only contributes and adds to your problems. As you are, of course, you're coming back and, you have to fill in your family, your spouse, your parents, whoever is relevant there, that, this is what's going on. I have this issue, which is a big self-esteem blow. And sets off a whole other chain of events. And as you continue to, try to work through this issue, you're taking the word of your healthcare provider at the VA as an authority figure. Eventually, you come back and you say, "Hey, that I still have these problems. This pill's not working." They say, "Okay, let's dial it in." You get a different set of pills. You go through that 2 or 3 times before finally the VA says, "Oh, I see what's going on here. Not only do you have a moral compass injury, which has caused you to manifest these phantom illnesses that are not in fact real." But now you're a pill seeker. So you're a bad person that did bad things, causing you to act in irrational ways. And now you're seeking pills. And of course, this comes back. The family stress mounts, financial stress mounts as you're now actually sick and unable to work. The family unit fractures. You move back into the basement with mom and dad, and you're still unable to pay your bills. Your sense of self-worth is just gone. The wife and the kids are gone. And it's a short road to joining that ranks of those 22 veterans a day that are committing suicide. So I think that's that personal portion of that. I've seen that play out time and again in this issue. So I think it's a pretty fair characterization of the extreme side of it. Of course, there are exceptions. There are VAs out there that were doing crackerjack jobs with really good providers that were taking good care of their folks. But overall, that issue, you go back to that 80% of denial, and that tells the whole story.
And to put a fine point on what Will is saying, the VA was telling veterans that they had to show that a specific malady they had was due to a specific chemical in a specific burn pit at a specific place on a specific date. And who can do that?
Yeah, we were effectively arguing over how many angels dance on the head of a pin, and it's up to the veteran that's seeking care to actually go out and prove that, which is ridiculous.
And so, and it added a lot of things. It wasn't just the burn pits that you said, like the list of things that were added to the list and part of the PACT Act is a host of things from Agent Orange up through the burn pits and all these other things, the toxicity things. I mean, there's like a list of 25 or 30, if I remember correctly. I'll actually send it to everybody. You can see the list. It's a lot of things, almost.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's good.
Oh, and I would say one of the big things that the PACT Act does is that it establishes presumption of service connection. For someone to be able to get a disability with the VA, they have to prove that they have a disability. They have to prove that they have to get a diagnosis for it. And they have to prove that there is a nexus with their military service. It has to be service connected. And so one of the things, and that was really difficult with this requirement that you had, you jump through all these hoops to show the service connection to a specific burn pit. So one of the things that the PACT Act does is that it sets a presumption of service connection for about 23 different maladies, predominantly cancers, but also a lot of respiratory things as well, and a number of other things. And it says, if you were in this area during these years and you have this malady, we're going to say it's service connected and we're going to automatically give you your disability. So, that's a huge relief for veterans to be able to move on. But yeah, it also includes Agent Orange. It also includes PFAS, which is a chemical within firefighting foam, aircraft firefighting foam, and fuel fire fighting foam that can leach into the water, and then even toxic exposures on ships. I mean, I remember on my carrier, we used to skim the JP5 off the top of our water before drinking it. And so that presumption is a big deal.
Yeah, and really to further drive that home, 3 years ago, even, our big strategy here was just getting one presumption on constrictive bronchiolitis, because that was the holy grail. And we had an awful lot of pushback on trying to get this work done. And, in addition to Grunstall, I'm also serving on the board of directors for Burn Pits 360. So I've actually been pretty thick in the middle of this advocacy work for the better part of 10 years. It's really just finding the system of not so much how things are done, but I think it was more of the common sense view of what is obtainable. And so the strategies would be formed around what is the low hanging fruit we can actually achieve, and let's shoot there. And that's what makes the PACT Act so remarkable, is that it really was an all in kind of a play. And it didn't just settle for these presumptions for the global war on terror era veterans. This, as Bob had mentioned, this thing goes back. I mean, I think it even covers like the folks that were cleaning up the atolls in the Pacific after nuclear testing. So this was not only ambitious, I think it was, once the power of all the VSOs came together and there was this synergy and alignment, this was a big deal. I mean, this went back and tried to correct for a lot of the, garbage that history has, left to us. So well done to Bob and his crew.
It's estimated that 2 to 3 million additional veterans are going to become eligible for VA healthcare because of this bill.
And so let's go back, Bob. You had said, like, we talked, it's been going for a long time, and these issues that we'll talk about. And then we got to the part where we're in the pre-conference. That's the official name in the spring.
Unofficial name, because
unofficially,
it's actually going to say they're actually doing that. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of the first time that I remember hearing about this, but it was more in the summer time frame. And so it looked like things were going okay, and then things get bogged down. So we take a few minutes here to talk about how did this just get all over the news this summer and go through? I guess, so maybe for you, Bob, like in the background, what got bogged down and says, okay, we're going to make a hardcore press and get this thing through? Well, yeah, on one hand, we said, hey, we got a deal. Is it perfect? No, but it's a deal. And we don't got much time left in Congress, because come September, those members are leaving and they're not coming back until after Thanksgiving. So, and we don't have the National Defense Authorization Act done, and we don't have the appropriations bills done. This ain't going to get done. It needs to get done now. So Senator Tester and Senator Moran of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, they sat down with Representative Tucano and Representative Bost of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and they started working things out. The problem we have nowadays is that Congress doesn't do things in regular order. It used to, going back to that Schoolhouse Rock, you would take a bill to the floor after it passes out of committee, you would debate it. People would offer amendments. I remember when I worked in the Senate, we'd have bills on the floor for 2 or 3 weeks with lots of amendments being offered. That doesn't happen anymore. The chair and the ranking member and the leadership, they put together a bill, they come down to the floor, they present it as a fait accompli, and they say, vote for it or vote against it. We're not doing any amendments, that's it. Well, Senator Toomey of Pennsylvania had some concerns about some budgetary issues. Did he have a point? Possibly. Did he ham-fist his delivery of it? Pretty badly. And he made it sound like he just didn't want to spend that much money on veterans. It was a little more complicated than that. He was worried that, you know, that enterprising bureaucrats were going to reclassify certain things as direct spending versus appropriated spending. And now I'm getting really geeking out on the budget stuff. And that was gonna open up all these hundreds of billions of dollars for non-defense spending. But he which may have been, you know, that may have happened, but who cares? You know, we got this to take care of. And he made it sound like they're going to actually shift money from the VA over to this non-defense spending, which wasn't going to happen. So we had to work. So, you know, we had this big press conference planned where we were going to, you know, have a big celebration and all of a sudden the vote doesn't get passed in the Senate. So our big celebration turns into a whiskey tango foxtrot. And you know, we were all at the press conference and saying, you know, I was at the press conference and I remember saying, this doesn't end today. Stay, you know, Congress, stay all weekend, stay all August. And I think I said something like, we'll deliver coffee and donuts tomorrow if you stay all night. I'll cook out on the Capitol lawn, you know, over the weekend with hamburgers and hot dogs if you need something to eat, but stay. And that's where, and then Rosie Torres from Burn Pitch 360 and Will from Grunstyle Foundation, they took that and they ran with it. It was awesome.
Yeah. So then that was the behind the scenes you were trying to get to go. And there's part of that is that sit on the Capitol steps. I think that was surprising to me and a lot of others. I'm like, okay, we're making a full court press on this thing, and it popped in the news and you're all over. So what was happening there of getting in front of essentially the public face of this, Will?
Well, we had learned through this journey, what works best is shame. You know, and we learned at the hands of the master with John Stewart coming in and showing us how to effectively leverage that and being that champion for that cause. You know, nobody had an appetite for this bill historically over the years. I mean, whether it was the veteran service organizations, because they're saying like, look, this just isn't realistic for what it is that we're actually going to need to accomplish to actually impact any meaningful anything. And of course, Congress didn't have any appetite to get involved in this stuff with the price tag attached. So what we were being told from both those circles was it was up to us to go build systemic momentum in the community, to get everybody educated, to provide cover and concealment for all those parties involved, to actually try to take it on, get something done. That was a bumpy ride. So when she got up to this past spring, I think the VSOs were really starting to all work together in a nice way, and all those different bills that Bob was talking about earlier, kind of like we decided this is what we're going to be rolling with. And John Stewart led that charge. Well, you know, we thought this thing was slam dunk. Once it made it out of the House, we thought it was done. And then, of course, there was the whole budgetary issue, and, you know, they had to go back to the House, then back over to the Senate again. I didn't even go to DC on that day because I really thought this was going to be procedural, had a lot of other things to do. So Rosie Torres and Tim Jensen, our chairman of our board, had actually gone to DC, and they thought this was just going to be a celebration. Then we had those 25 Republicans flip on that bill, you know, which is the exact same bill that they had voted on like 3 weeks earlier, with the addition or subtraction of one sentence that was regarding, I think, rural veterans affairs clinics and their funding issues. It was a budgetary thing. But at any rate, we were shocked and surprised. So I got a phone call about 3:30 in the afternoon from Tim Jensen saying, hey, man, this is what's going on. We're down here at Union Station. We're at Chick-fil-A having some of the Lord's chicken, and we have decided that we're not going home. We're going to go plant ass right on those steps of that Capitol. We're probably going to jail tonight. How soon can you get here? So I said, we'll be on the minute right out. And so that's kind of how that went down. I think I landed about 10 p.m. and we just started. I think when I got there, there was maybe 6 or 7 other folks that had been there from earlier that day. It was certainly less than a dozen. And we just started pushing out on our platforms, trying to raise the alarm to get, all these other veterans out there. And that was the moment, because we knew if this thing was done, it was done. And like what Bob was going to say, that's going to be a new Congress, and you're going to have to start all over. We saw this thing vaporizing, and this was now taking the direction of, we need research. That's where everybody wants to focus, is let's just understand the nature of this issue before we can engage it. And that was just simply unacceptable. All of us in our group that was really pushing for that on our end, were all personally impacted with this stuff. My toxicities are through the roof. I'm so full of heavy metals and stuff, I glow. I mean, it's personal and near and dear. And so that was the line, and we were not going to take that setting down. And if we had to continue to build that and push that as large as what we could, we would have. And I firmly believe that had that not passed, we'd probably still be sitting on those Capitol steps right now.
And so I think, and then it made the difference, I guess, Bob, when you're in there, that helped, those events happening outside helped push it over and got the final bill passed that we see today.
Absolutely. When you have the Secretary of Veterans Affairs delivering pizza to the guys and gals on the steps, when you have them all on social media, posting. I was down there at 2 a.m. and we did a video about, when the Capitol, when the Congress is in session, there's a light on in the dome of the Capitol to tell the rest of DC that Capitol's in session. Hey, it's off, but all these folks are here. It's 2 a.m. They're standing the fire watch. Why aren't you working, senators? And that was helpful.
Oh yeah, and just the amount of support that came in from not even just across the country, but from even our coalition allies. It was a funny side story, Bob. You probably remember when we received a bottle of Canadian whiskey showed up.
No. Why did you not call me?
Well, it happened. So this bottle of Canadian whiskey shows up with a nice note saying, hey, we were there too. And, thanks for what you're doing. And, here's this nice bottle of Canadian whiskey on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces. Actually ran into the guy that sent that out, the Military Influencer Conference here a week ago in Las Vegas. Just a weird coincidence. So, it was really a joint effort of people just getting mad and supporting us and what we were trying to do in whatever token way that they could. But more importantly, man, those phones of those senators was blowing up. I mean, they were getting emails, they were getting phone calls. By the time we were into like the 5th day of this thing, the conversation had flipped from, well, here's the reasons why we can't do this, to, well, I absolutely support this. Oh, yes, I had no part of that. Please make this stop. And that's what carried the day.
Excellent. It's absolutely amazing. I was shocked when I saw it happening. There, the conversation went from this isn't passing to we're actually protesting, and have it turn out that in fairly short order, I guess, as these things go, that
meteoric by congressional standards.
That's right. That's right. So very impressive. I wanted more people to hear it. Now, we're shifting here because I'm now seeing, like, all over my TV is Camp Lejeune Water, which I think has an element of toxicity to it to go through. But I guess, so Camp Lejeune Water, is that in the PACT Act? Like, is it sitting there as like a sub piece of legislation? It's like different. Is that what it is, Bob? Like,
yeah, and I'll defer to Ron on a lot of this. It's just it's an additional element, and what makes it unique is that whereas for most toxic exposure, you don't have a right to sue the government over the toxic exposure. In this case, you do, and there's a complicated process with it, and Ron knows that. But this was this was also something that Senator Tillis and Senator Burr of North Carolina and a number of the North Carolina representatives have been working on for years, and had never been able to get anywhere, and it finally got put on this bill.
Okay, so do we go to that, Ron? So this thing is very different. We said we've been talking about all these things. It's the presumptive, right? So something has something wrong, it goes through and it gets you medical benefits with the VA. It says you go to the VA, you get the benefits. That's not what Camp Lejeune Water does. What does Camp Lejeune Water do that's different, Ron?
So let me first commend both Bob and Will for their acts of service, right? Magnificent on behalf of veterans. But let me just, so that expanded eligibility, right? There are 42 different injuries that lawyers can now sue for. So we think we got a great deal. Lawyers got a better deal. Second thing, presumption of service-related injury. lowers the barrier for the lawyers to prove their case. Great for veterans, much better for lawyers. So this Camp Lejeune bill slipped into the larger PACT Act is a special interest bill drafted by a single lawyer for lawyers, right? This one lawyer talks about spending $14 million to lobby on this effort. But I'm going to give you 3 bad things about the bill, and I'm going to give you 1 magnificent thing about the bill. So top 3 things that are different about this bill than any other kind of mass tort class action bill is that, as Bob and Will were saying, this is drafted for a single base, right? Camp Lejeune. Whereas this water contamination and burn pits is pervasive throughout the military. So they kept it simple because it's not in the best interest of all veterans. It's in the best interest of a small handful of lawyers that are going to all participate. So in October alone, they've spent $50 million, a minimum, of advertising. So that lets you know that they expect a return on their money. Number 2, there's only a 2-year eligibility window, all right? Takes years to do this, but there's supposed to be over $1 million or 1 million people in numerosity. So there's no way that they're going to reach all the veterans that are affected, right? This is a quick raid on the Treasury to get it done. Like one and done, the small group of lawyers are going to be billionaires because there are billions of dollars at stake, right? And then the third thing, as I was drafting this, it actually came to pass. So I was going to say everything has to go through the Navy Tort Claim Unit. Now, I'm a Naval Academy graduate. I know there are fewer than 30 people in that unit. And they wrote the bill that way because they wanted to overrun the system. And in fact, 2 days ago, we learned that the Navy JAG Tort Claim Unit is not going to use the administrative claim process because they're overrun. They've had over 10,000 claims. So that already came to pass. But, you know, when one thinks about the litigation process, it is very, very different from the inside. So millions of affected Marines, but there are going to be fewer than 100 trials for all of that. And that's where the raid on the Treasury comes, because I'll use a similar example. In 2015, there was an attorney that was indicted by the Justice Department for submitting 40,000 fraudulent claims in BP worth over $2 billion. And the Justice Department indicted him, and the guy defended himself and got off. But with my system, that guy'd be in jail right now. And I intend to enforce it because, not on my watch. I'm not going to let these guys raid the Treasury. So, yeah, very interesting. But the great thing about Camp Lejeune, and I invite Will and Bob and Local Vest and any veterans listening to this that want to join me, is that they gave us the playbook, okay? They gave us the playbook, because if they could do it for Camp Lejeune, we can do it for all the rest of the bases. So thank you very much, Mr. Ed Bell. Thank you for the playbook. And by the way, gentlemen, the way we fund it is by participating in the Camp Lejeune tort, because the horse is out of the barn. The law is written. The raid on the Treasury is underway, whether we know it or not. And the best we can do is for me to jump into the snake pit and fight for every dollar, take it out of their hands and put it into the veteran community. So that's the difference between Camp Lejeune and the PACT Act.
Okay, can you explain too, when it comes, like you were talking about tort, like a typical tort to go through, and that like how lawyers, like it's all over TV right now. What's happening around, like people advertise and you call the attorneys? Why are they doing that, or what does it do?
So as I alluded to earlier, this is the most profitable business model in the world. Nobody knows about it because it is so profitable. And many of these attorneys, so in tobacco, they refer to them as the Texas Five. There were 5 lawyers that became billionaires, each individually, in the tobacco litigation, right? And that's what this is right now. It's a handful of law firms that are spending money on TV and radio to generate phone calls that onboard them. I'm sure everybody has been solicited. It's horrible in terms of how they're violating kind of the rules of advertising, legal advertising. You're onboarded, you sign a contract, and then you deliver your medical records and they settle your case. it is an extremely straightforward process, but they, you know, it's a cartel. So nobody really knows what's going on behind the scenes. I do. And so, you know, very few people are going to get very rich on this. And we as a veterans community need to know what's going on, because I can take that money from them and put it back into our community. So it's complicated. And, you know, this is not the venue for it, but, you know, I'm a unicorn in this space. You know, there's a phrase, you know, unmatched experience and expertise. I have that. And so I have to go in and I have to prove that. And that's what I'm going to do. And this is the first opportunity.
And you're doing it, and I understand you're doing a couple of things. So one of them is just the Victory Litigation Fund is as the law is written to go through and said there's that essentially instead of having lawyers fund other lawyers to build the cases, it's to have other veterans be able to go in and help fund to start for the Camp Lejeune Water, right? That's one aspect. And that then there's also expanding out and trying to figure out, as you said, the playbook of why is this one base, one issue, one set period of time that should really apply to a much wider set of veterans when it comes to litigation.
Correct. So the concept that I'm introducing is something known as strategic philanthropy. And it's where a company aligns itself with a particular social cause. And because litigation finance is so profitable, and the lawyers will admonish me, right? So I need to say past performance is no guarantee of future results, right? But it is my intention through what's known as a security token to take $1 of conscious capital, as I refer to it, and deliver $10 back into the community. Okay. So, and that type of profitability is a layup for these law firms. And I can show under the hood just how profitable it is. And all I'm doing is I'm putting the majority of the money back into the community. It's that simple. So strategic philanthropy, and I intend to take, because this litigation finance is the most competitive, adversarial, and profitable business model, and it's zero sum. So every dollar I can take out of a lawyer's hands or a hedge fund's hands, I can put it back into the veterans community. I love this business. And as veterans learn more about it, they're going to love it too. And it's the democratization of this asset class, because right now, just a small group of folks are getting very rich. Large accredited investors, hedge funds, a lot of overseas money, right? But through what's known as a Reg A offering, I can sell to unaccredited investors. And that's what I'm going to do. Now, the cap on a Reg A is 75 million bucks. So I can raise $75 million from regular troops, retired people, and then put 750 million back into the community. Now that's money that some of these law firms and hedge funds were going to keep for themselves. And you know what they would do with it? Buy more homes, buy jets. That's what they would do with it. All the while saying that they're advocating on behalf of veterans, laughing all the way to the bank, thinking they gave us something great, expanded VA benefits. Gentlemen, we are being done wrong, and I refuse to let that happen because I know too much and I can fix it. So I will.
So let's talk as we go as kind of a forward of what we do from here, right? Because Ron's getting that to go through. I guess the distinction that having the conversation with these three gentlemen over the time, and I want you all to walk away with, that the PACT Act is getting the help at the VA, right? Opening up those doors to get the help. And Camp Lejeune is this weird thing on the side that's not quite the same, right? But it's not what we're saying, like it's all messed up in here. It's like the PACT Act is an amazing piece of legislation and it's this Camp Lejeune Water, the way it's set, it makes you look a little bit askance at it and needs some work, and that Ron's talking here. But we'll go back to that PACT Act and what we need to do from here, right? It's one thing to pass legislation, but what happens from here when it comes to the VA piece? I guess I could ask it this way, Will, if someone maybe was previously denied or something going on here, what should they be doing if they're like, wow, maybe I'm one of those 2 or 3 million?
Yeah, so you can go back in and re-engage this. Go visit your VSO, get in there into the VA system. Secretary McDonough has done a fantastic job of getting the VA spun up just as fast as, I mean, they were like waiting, like the instant this thing went and President Biden signed that thing, man, the VA was pushing like crazy. So, I mean, Secretary McDonough has just done a wonderful job on that. If you are somebody that fits that bill, you know, re-engage the system. They are aware of how to handle you. That said, there are a couple of other things you can do to start with that is not going to be this bill has landed and now we have a miraculous solution. The fact of the matter is people are walking around with time bombs inside their bodies, and no legislation is necessarily going to help that. And you've got to get engaged in your own health care. Number one, start by going to publichealth.va.gov/exposures/burn pits. And from there, you can get smart on this topic, like really in-depth, high-level stuff. Number two, you can join the registry, both the VA's registry and a burnpits360.org. Those are long-term plays, but it does help facilitate the research, which does come back into this stuff and plays into that. Number three, you need to take control of your health. And I'm telling you from experience, I fought this stuff for years and years with very little movement. And even to this day, I'm not real fond of my primary care provider in my VA. I've had to go out and figure out how to take care of my own health. And that starts in this process, right? Number one, go get a toxicology test. You can Google Great Plains Laboratories, I believe it's .com, or just Google them. That's where I started and went through. And, you know, they can do a heavy metal toxicity test through your hair. They can take a non-heavy metal chemical, industrial chemical stuff test through your urine. That's going to come back and tell you what is in you and what amount that it is in you, and what are those chelators and binders, and how do you start detoxing this stuff out of your body. Now, I went for 14 years with the VA basically telling me that I had a moral compass injury because I'd seen or done something so contrary to my sense of right and wrong in Iraq that it shattered my psyche, and I'm making up illnesses here, take some zombie dope and go buy crazy stuff on QVC at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's what you do when you're on that stuff. Whereas once you do this test, now you know how to get it out of you. Well, I still can't get the VA to take that. So, I mean, there's implementation stuff that needs to happen next. And we have to really write that down. It's not a perfect smooth system, but that's where you start, get that information in your hands so you can start getting it out of you. Infrared saunas, different supplements. These things will start that detoxification process. Grunstyle Foundation, we're giving away 1 in-home hyperbaric oxygen chamber a month, every month this year, to veterans that have been denied access to healthcare on this issue of military toxic exposures. You know, we know all these 3 things kind of plug together on how you can take control. But that's what I'd recommend. First and foremost, take care of your health first. You know, let the VA system portion of it, you know, definitely engage that. Don't let that fall by the wayside. But that could be a lengthy engagement. Like I said, even my doctors are even aware of the role that I've played in this over the years. And I still can't get them to take my tox reports because they're more concerned that I'm trying to use it as a way to grift the government on getting benefits. So that's starting to lessen. I think we're going to continue to make progress there, but it's in your hands.
And Bob, what do you say on the legislative side of like the election yesterday to go through, but what are the call them the hot VA topics or veterans centric topics that you see maybe gaining steam, or the biggest ones that you expect in the next few years?
Well, you know, number one is going to be PACT Act implementation. And you know, Secretary McDonough is all hot and bothered to get this run, but the problem is that he runs the second largest department in the United States government, but he has less political appointees within his whole department than one undersecretary in the Department of Defense has under his or her little bit of it. And it's a real problem, because as a former political appointee in a department, the political appointees are the ones that have the authority to be able to give top cover to the bureaucrats to get stuff done and get things through. And so the secretary has to rely upon a far greater number of the same bureaucrats that have been denying these claims for years, for decades. And so we're going to really have to monitor that implementation closely, because there are plenty of people that still don't like this. And so when an individual veteran is having a problem, they need to tell the veteran organizations they work with immediately, and tell them to call their DC folks to get that working as well. And I believe that both Will and I will have our emails provided as well in this, and so reach out to us too. But we need to monitor that implementation. They're talking about really rolling this out in January, with a lot of the tests being done. There's one thing that I need to talk to the rest of the veterans community about, and the rest of the experts. Yesterday, the secretary said that they're going to prioritize cancer treatment for presumptions, which sounds reasonable. Sort of triage aspect, though, is like there may be someone that has COPD that's going to die right away, that doesn't have cancer, and maybe they need to be a higher priority. The blanket cancer is just a little concerning, that it doesn't take into account the actual medical opinion of the doctor that's treating the veteran. So we'll have to look at that. Along the lines of what Will was talking about with be your own coordinator, be your own care coordinator, is access to healthcare. The fact of the matter is that the VA, I use the VA for my healthcare. Once I'm in front of a healthcare provider, it's pretty good. Getting there, man, that is a bureaucratic maze, and the healthcare administrators are more often than not a block to my access than an assistance. And so there's something called the community care program that says if a veteran can't get in front of a VA healthcare provider in a certain amount of time, they get to go in front of they get sent out into the community. And I use that too. And the VA is trying to roll that back. And so access to that healthcare is going to be crucial, especially on the PACT Act implementation, because there is so much more expertise just in terms of numbers in the private sector healthcare community than, in terms of percentages, yes, there are probably more VA doctors that have knowledge about a higher percentage of VA doctors that have knowledge about toxic exposure than in the general population. But there's still more doctors in the general population that have knowledge about this stuff. So we need to continue to have access to that community care. And then, lastly, suicide prevention is going to be a big issue. There's going to be a lot of implementation of a previous suicide prevention bill that was a big deal, called the Prevents Act. And that was a task force. I forgot the name of it, but it was a big. There's going to be about $50 million of grants that are going to be coming out. We got to make sure those are done correctly. We're really concerned about some of the unintended consequences of some of the things like the red flag courts and the fiduciary rule that significantly scare a lot of veterans. 46% of veterans own firearms, and scare a lot of veterans to believe that they can't go get VA mental health care because they're worried that they're going to be put into one of these programs and they're going to lose their rights to possess and purchase their firearms. And then on the suicide prevention, there seems to be a real hesitancy on the part of VA to address the issues of combat exposure, moral injury, and suicide risk. And back in 2016, when they were doing their annual study, they showed that the combat veteran suicide risk was about 4 times the overall veteran suicide risk, which was already about twice as high as the non-veteran suicide risk. So, but that seems to have fallen away, and we're really concerned about that. We think that that's a significant element, especially the element of moral injury.
All right, and then Ron, when it comes on Camp Lejeune, the clock has already started this short window. What does that look like in 2023 from addressing what's there and trying to change that?
So again, let me first commend both Bob and Will. With your plans were all very, very admirable, but they're going to cost money, right? Instead of the community kind of scraping together pennies, my intention is to participate in this Camp Lejeune litigation. Again, complicated plan, I'll reveal it later, but to take as much money as I can that's going to be distributed and put it back into the community. So I have what's known as a Reg D offering. It's on Local Vest. People can look at it. And Will, you said something very, very important that I got from this. The element of shame, right? My project, there is no more profitable or altruistic project on the planet. And I will challenge anybody on a point-by-point basis. So what the hell is anybody sitting on the sidelines for? Right? I see REIT deals, and just because somebody doesn't understand it, all you need to know is that I understand it. And so I'm raising money in a Reg D, and I bought the website, watchmepickafight.com, because veterans, you don't want to hear me talk about complicated stuff. You want to watch me do it. And that's what I intend to do. So there's a big conference on December 8th in New York on Camp Lejeune. I'm going to do a webinar with Local Vest after that. And at that point, I'll give us, the full plan of what I'm going to do and how we can do it. But the bottom line, gentlemen, is Bob, Will, I'm coming to the fight and I bring substantial resources. Okay. And it's my intention on this call to work with both of your organizations and really any organization that wants to work with me to put me into the fight, to get that amount of money to redeploy back into the veteran community. That's what I'm looking to do. So anybody that wants to work with me, I'll work with you.
And to build on what Ron is saying, so you all probably get those emails from your veteran organizations saying, please sign this petition to your senator and representative about this or that bill or this or that regulation. That costs that veteran organization somewhere between 50 cents and $1 per signature. Just the advertising they have to do, the infrastructure of the web systems that they have to build, that costs them about 50 cents to $1 per letter, per signature, per person. And that has an impact, but it don't come cheap. So
look at the economic engine, right? There are billions of dollars that are going to go to law firms and hedge funds. We can use that money for us. And it's not conjecture, it's law. It's right there for the taking, And these guys are slow and fat and comfortable. And I am hungry, gentlemen. Put me to work. It's ours to take as a community. I'm telling you right now, it's ours to take.
So we go through it. As you can see, I knew we were going to have an exciting event to come in here. I got to tell you, when I started looking into this in, I don't know, when we started talking, Will, in there, and had seen what was going on, I was very confused about what had happened, right? And I see the comments, I've been seeing the chat, people are like, oh, that's how this works. That's why we've had things that have been a problem in the past that came to a head this summer with the PACT Act. We're seeing things about Camp Lejeune. We have still things that we need to fix, but as a community, here this Veterans Week, there's a lot of things that have been done. We have a long ways to go. And I hope that's what you all walk away with, a better understanding today about what happened this year is a big year. Hopefully next year is an even bigger year to continue to move forward and move things from being in the dark about what has occurred with veterans for so many years, bring those things forward and get them fixed, in a respectable way. That people don't have to feel bad about what they went through, that money is there because these are things that happened while they're protecting the country. And so we're out there to continue to do that. So I hope all of you here today have learned a lot more about what happened. There's a lot more to this. There's things happening in the chat. I know what we're going to do is, from Ron and Bob and Will, we're going to send a recording out of this here the next day or two. We'll include lots of links for ways to get help. I encourage you all to go and read more about this. If you think you were affected, if you think one of your family members were affected, in many cases, there's things that you can do to help those who are still here or help those who were affected may not be with us anymore. So I encourage you all to do that. Continue to learn more. I mean, these are our brothers and sisters who are out serving. So thank you, all of you, all three of you, and those of you who've been participating here. This has been extremely enlightening for me. And I just encourage you all to continue to figure out what's going on in this space and advocate on your own behalf. All right, so thank you all. I'm going to close the webinar from here. I hope you all have a great rest of your Veterans Day week, and happy early birthday to the Marines, even though on the Navy side. So that's right. Have a good day tomorrow. All right, thank you all, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thank you.
Here,
Thanks.